everyone. This is an exciting conversation. I would say I'm honored to be able to share the stage with these two brothers. As you know, if you Google both names, you'll see a laundry list of accomplishments and things to be able to celebrate. But before we get going, I do want to level set on who's in the room before we learn more about who's in front of us. And so can we get a quick poll, raise of hands of those that are business owners? All right, aspiring business owners. And I think this will be consistent with our topic today. If we could get a hand raise of those that would say, I'm a leader. All right, this is great. All right, so of course there are bios that I could read. I am not going to read to you. We are all grown, so we can look those up, email them to you afterwards. But I do think it's important that when you do hear from others that we are able to hear their words on how they would like to describe themselves. So Dr. Moore, if you could share with the audience a little bit about yourself, what you would want them to know before we get into our conversation.
I am a transitional pastor. I pastored for 42 years and about 8 months, Faith Chapel. I recently transitioned out of that. So now my focus is on leadership and helping and supporting others.
All right, that's great. Brother Ed?
Awesome. So I appreciate that. It's not by job title. And congratulations on the transition. That's been a beautiful thing to see, continuity in an institution. So my name is Ed Fields. I have the honor of serving as Senior Advisor and Chief Strategist for the City of Birmingham. But I'm here as not as Chief Fields, but as Brother Ed. So please refer to me as Brother Ed. I think of myself in 3 ways these days in this season of my life. First, as a civic strategist. Through all my career, it has really been about civic engagement, honoring and understanding the potential of the human will and how we can connect our institutions and organizations in that way. But I'm also a poet and I'm also an essayist. So I like to write, and right now I'm just converting a lot of raw material into something that can be discernible and hopefully helpful to people.
All right, so we have 2 dynamic leaders, and with this topic of leadership, I think it's very important for us to be on the same page on how we define it. So Dr. Moore, if you could define leadership, which words would you use, or if there are key terms that you would say, all right, I haven't stringed together a full definition of leadership, but these are key terms that I would use in defining it.
When I think of leadership, I have 2 primary definitions. The first definition is that leadership is the art of inspiring people to do something with the focus on people. And the key words in this definition is art, which implies something that you can learn. Leadership is learnable, but it's also inspirational. Every person has something on the inside of them, and it's the leader's job to light that flame or to enhance that flame. So I believe that leadership is the art of inspiring people to do something with the focus on people. Second definition, I believe that it's motivation. Leadership is motivating a group of people, like a group of people, toward the achievement of a mutually agreed upon goal or vision, beneficial vision, and this is the key, integrating the needs of the people with the goals of the organization. And so it's not really leadership if you don't integrate those 2 things, the needs of the people and the goals of the organization.
That's great.
That's great, Dr. Moore. So I would simply add to that, and that's a perfect bedrock definition of leadership. I would add to it that leaders are a keeper of a flame. So it's really about the vision. Vision lives within all of us in varying degrees and varying seasons. And it happens to be more relevant in some seasons and in some contexts than others. I asked someone the other day, would Dr. King be the Dr. King we know if he was doing what he did right now in this space that we know, in the world that we know today? We don't know. We know that he was called and that it was much providence that he was born in the time that he was. And so I think that context matters, but more than anything else, it's about the fire that burns within us. So it is about the ability to convert a vision into reality. That's how I think about leadership at base. It's not about title. It's not about position. Proximity can have something to do with the effectiveness, but it starts with having a vision. Yes. And that vision lives here and here.
Love it. Love it. Love it.
So just my personal experience when it pertains to leadership, some of the qualities and the characteristics that I was able to unpack and learn was actually me serving another leader. Can you give an example of times in which you had to serve another leader to see which qualities and characteristics you wanted to implement in your own leadership?
Well, my journey, my leadership journey, was not the perfect journey. I think the perfect journey is sitting under someone, not having the oversight of whatever you're doing, and learning from that individual. But my journey was a little bit different in that I didn't have that. I didn't have the proximity of sitting under someone and learning what to do and what not to do. So my spiritual father was Dr. Fred Price. So I learned from him from a distance. In other words, looking for character traits, what he said about his life, priorities, commitment to excellence. I learned those things, but it wasn't through proximity. And that's unfortunate, because if you don't have someone that you can touch, you know, and you can connect with, and that can challenge you personally, you make a lot of mistakes. I mean, you learn through experience, and experience is all right, but it's good when you have proximity where someone can speak into your life. So my journey was a little bit different in that I was learning through TV and reading books and grabbing this and grabbing that and trying to place it in my life. But I don't think that's the perfect way to do it.
And YouTube, you learned through YouTube as well?
Well, YouTube wasn't in existence. Hey, I wish we had YouTube.
Real talk. There's an entire universe in YouTube about adulting and people learning how to become, which is interesting, but that's the world we live in. I would say that I've had a couple of experiences with that, and I love the question, because there is just nothing more powerful than proximity to a leader. When people ask me about, because my career journey has been interesting, well, how did you know when and what made you, I always say what I've learned is it is more important to consider who you are working with than the specific task. You know, if you're working with a general area of passion, that's really important. But if you could choose between organizations and all things being equal, you go with working with someone that inspires you, challenges you, and puts you in a position to be your best self. And I've had the fortune of doing that in a couple of instances. Look, much of my career has been supporting key leaders. It is not being the leader. 15 years in association management means that I was responsible for supporting the board chair, the executive director, the pastor, whomever else, as the invisible one. That's how I built my career. That's how for those who have known me, it's because I've actually been doing work with you. Most people didn't know me in general market, but I've done a lot of stuff. And I learned a lot from watching leaders, the best of the best in their industries and their sectors. And I saw a lot of challenges with some people, and I saw some great wins. So 2 good examples. When I was a very young professional coming to Birmingham, I had the chance to sit at a table with Dr. Neil Birdie, the President Emeritus of Birmingham Southern College, and Odessa Woolfolk, the chairperson emeritus of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. And what struck me sitting with them was the fact that he literally had his sleeves rolled up, and she literally had like a map or something. And these are people who have their names on buildings already, people that streets are named after and whatnot. And the impression that left me, it was a room like this, and there's a big boardroom, and there was no pomp and circumstance. They were literally like, okay, how's this going to work? They were tacticians. They were on it. They were asking the detailed questions. And that really set the tone for me. Okay, when I get to be an elder and have gray hair, that's what that looks like. And I'll be doggone if the gray hair has not emerged. And so I know now I have a responsibility to not just be Brother Ed and walk in and people see some sort of fancy title, but that when it's time to work, they see me leaned in and that I present that way. And so that's one. The second is just working with, it's been interesting, Dr. Moore, working with the mayor. The mayor, for several people, most of the people here would be his age or younger, but he's been like a younger brother than me for many years. And then he ends up hiring me and becomes my boss. And I can honestly say I've learned more from him than he's learned from me in our 20-year walk together. And I'm saying this because it's important. As we evolve in leaders in different seasons of life, that inspiration, that motivation can come from different places, especially from those from whom we have poured into, because it can come back. If you've done well and they've done their part, they're going to exceed you. And he's exceeded many people, just a few years older than him. So I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. I have to remind myself I'm the moderator and say I got to come with another one. Mm-hmm. And it reminded me of a statement that I heard from Dr. Miles Monroe. He said, whenever you come across a leader, typically folks say that person is powerful. He said, no, you really come across a leader when you say that person empowered me. And that's the takeaway that I heard just from these two, I'll say stories, but also recaps. Brother Ed, I'm gonna come to you directly with this question. One of the traits of leadership, we would say would be communication. And I would say transparent communication. You mentioned your role at the city and also with the mayor's leadership. And one of the things that evolved immediately once you got into the position at the city is that there was this window of transparency and being very intentional about that. Can you share with us some of the behind the scenes conversations that led to possibly some of the concerns on wanting to be so transparent with the operations of the business of the city, but also the wins that submerged from being transparent essentially to your stakeholders?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'll speak to the first part in particular, which is what led to this primary motivation, the strategic intent to be transparent. Two things, and I'm going to connect this to Small Business Week because that's the context in which we sit. I was an entrepreneur for 8 years, and I just crossed the street from Tish's place over here, Thrive. Go support Thrive. It's right across the street. And she was expressing just, trying to figure out how to navigate City Hall. It's frustrating. I used to have that frustration. Among other things, City Hall has earned a reputation of being this windowless chasm of concrete. I've never said that before, but that sounds about apt and about right. And so we still haven't broken through that. That's an earned reputation over decades. And it's an institution that has really been purposeful in creating harm for Black folks in particular. So that's something that we carry, trying to be change agents inside the organization, but also representing the identity of something that has really been harmful to us, that has been personally, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically challenging for me, as someone who never aspired to be in government. So that's a little bit of an aside, but it's related to the motivation to go in there and do something different. So the mayor, for those who don't know, I served as a campaign manager for the mayor's campaign, his first campaign to become mayor. And he knocked on a lot of doors personally. We know he knocked on over 50,000 doors as a campaign, but I'm telling you, that young man was out there every day. He did wear that hole in his shoes. And much of what you see happening today came literally from the mouths of people on their porch. It's really that simple. You talk about strategy. We didn't have money to do much of anything, but we can go talk to people. And he did that. And what we did well was convert that into something that became an actual agenda plan with metrics attached to it that we could track it all the way through the first term. So how we got in up front, how we made that happen on the front end was listening to the frustration of residents, built up over years. It wasn't just about the folks that we replaced. It was about years and years of frustration. And it was really about the fact that there was actually good things happening at City Hall for many years that many of us just didn't know enough about. So it was about cranking up the volume. And I will say to this day, no matter how good it is, no matter how big it is, no matter how much we do, there's going to be probably after 24 hours, it's going to be a little bit of a, what did you do for me lately, energy from the mayor. He's our standard bearer. And so he creates a lot of, not a lot, but he creates this consistent tension for us to just go higher, no matter what. We talk to other cities, they're complimentary of what's happening in Birmingham, and he has another vision for just how much we can do. And I don't know if we'll ever know what it looks like when we get there, but the tension that he sustains respectfully, and not in a way that's harmful to our team, but that has been so important to us, breaking through many people's expectations, even as we exceed them.
That's good. Dr. Moore, you spoke recently, or just a few minutes ago, about how some of the leadership characteristics you essentially had to teach yourself. And so usually there is this characteristic that we may feel like is innate, because I feel like the way the world defines leadership is just like, man, they just got it. But they also don't see some of the behind the scenes work, right? The work that is continuous, but also the work that you have to put a bit of a science to. What were some of those elements of leadership that you had to teach yourself that you can share with our audience that has been proven true based off what you've built thus far?
Well, I talked about my journey of not having proximity to a leader. So I had to learn, right on the track. And so what I learned from a spiritual standpoint is that what I had learned would only work so far. And here's what I mean. When I first entered into leadership, I didn't know anything about leadership. I had no clue about leadership. I'm a preacher, see? And so you pray, you live right, try to treat everybody right, everything will work out. But I didn't know the difference between preaching and leading. I didn't know that there was a difference between preaching and leading. What happened as the church grew, you can't preach it any further. You have to lead it further.
That's good.
And so I had to educate myself on the concepts of leadership. Leadership and preaching is one thing. Leadership is inspiring, motivating, it's challenging, it's empowering people. So all those principles that you can Google now, I had to find a book here, learn by making a mistake here, making a mistake here, not understanding, having an objective, not understanding strategy, not understanding execution. But now I'm in something that requires me to understand that, and to understand this, and to understand that. And so what happens, the church can only get to a certain level. And I think that's why, and I'm speaking for, it's a business, church is a business. Right. So churches kind of get to a certain level and they stop. Get to maybe 100 people and they stop. Because you can't preach it any further. Right. You can only lead it further.
But that'll preach.
That's right.
I saw the pens come out like, I was waiting for my tweetable.
Yeah, that's right.
You can't preach it any further. You got to lead it further.
Oh, that's good. And Pastor Mike, you know what? You're in my notes. Because in this development and the evolution of you preaching to essentially seeing the shift of the business of the church to where now you are leading, there's advisors that you establish. And I was doing a little bit of research on your podcast.
Okay.
And you established 5 types of advisors that leaders need. And I'm gonna share those out. And if you could say it off the top of your head, I'll be very impressed.
Okay.
We have the expert advisor. We have the experienced advisor, we have a sounding board advisor, we have a partner advisor, and then we have the spiritual advisor. How would you rank those advisors in the importance as you evolve as a leader to say, all right, which one of these should I start with first, or have my antennas up for someone to be able to give me insight? And then from there, this would be the sequential steps of the types of advisors that I would have, or can one person have all those qualities?
I don't think one person can have all those qualities, but we have business people here, and then we got the believers here. You got the saints here. So, speaking from just a spiritual standpoint, and because that's the field that I'm in, I want me a spiritual advisor. I want me a spiritual advisor who can help me with the foundations, because everything I build has to have some spiritual context to it from my vantage point. Now, other leaders may not even think like that. If it's something that is outside of your sphere of experience, you need a expert advisor. If you're building a building, you have no construction experience, you don't know anything about building a building, you need an expert
That's right.
advisor. If you're doing something that you've never done before, you don't have a track record, you don't have a history, then you need an experienced advisor. You need somebody who's walked it out, and they can tell you the ins and the outs of that. Now you need a personal advisor like my wife, because she gonna come to me straight. You know, I need somebody who really has my back, and I can talk out of my fears, because even in public I can't talk my fears. You know, I got to be perfect but see, I can talk my fears, I can talk my concerns, I can talk this, I can talk that, and then you got to have somebody on the team, a partner advisor. So I don't think any one person can really fit those things. And to me, that's where leadership comes in, knowing what you need and not thinking that you know everything. That's the worst thing you can do, is to think that you're a one-man band. And so as you grow and mature, you know what you need. You know, and you're not ego tripping.
That's right.
You're not dealing with your insecurities of trying to build some yourself, so you can say, I don't know this.
Right.
You help me with this. I don't know this.
That's right.
I need you to help me with this. And the more secure you are, the more you can grab people in to support you.
That's good.
Yeah, so that's powerful, Doc. If I could just say one additional thing in support of it, I think. So having seen that over and over, it is certainly about your ego. That's a part of it. The other part of that is clarity of vision.
Right.
If you are on fire and you're the chief advocate of that vision, steward of the vision, then it kind of opens your mind up as to what's possible, because one part of it is ego and pride in terms of how do I reach out? Should I reach out? Another part of that is I have a responsibility to go and engage somebody else. And I just want to support that idea by the vision part. It keeps coming back to that, because you may not know anything about anything, but man, if you just have a sense of what that thing could look like, all of a sudden, you know, Providence, the universe gets with you, God gets with you, and starts lining things up.
Right. So with it being Small Business Week, and we did have a quick poll of those that are small business owners in here, and in that journey of starting your business, you may feel like you're in your purpose. Sometimes that could be commingled, because in order to run a business, it takes resources, right? And so now the other P word, profit, may get in the way and disrupt the ability for you to be able to prioritize. And this question is for both. When do you know you found your purpose? Because it's on the heels of the term that I've heard consistently, which has been vision, right? And I believe part of that unlocking is this piece that occurs with either this triggering that has manifested itself in a way to where you said, all right, I need to solve this problem, or this piece that occurs with me being my full self. I've identified the space I'm able to do that. And so can you share with the audience in which I would say indicators or flagpoles to say you're on the right track? I think you may have found your purpose.
I think, you know, you referred to Miles Monroe, and Miles Monroe speaks of the thing can't identify itself. The thing can call itself a thing. A hammer can't say I'm a hammer. It's the manufacturer. So I think getting the mind of God, I mean, and my answer is going to always have a spiritual bent to it, but getting God's mind on who you are and why you're here and what you're supposed to do. But I think it's also important to look at your giftings, look at because God won't call you to do something that he hadn't put the giftings on the inside of you. So what are my giftings? What am I good at? Then, people said this about me, Isaac, years as a kid. They said, when you talk, you make it plain. Now, I didn't know I was a teacher. I didn't know I was called to be a teacher, but there was a natural gifting to explain things, even though I hadn't gone to school for that. So your giftings. And then people will recognize it. At some point, people will recognize what you're good. They will give vent to it. They will affirm it. And then just your passions, man, what you're excited about, what you would do without anyone paying you a penny is a good chance. That's what you're called to do.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I could say more, but I really think that's it.
So, and I'm actually going to come back to you, Brother Ed. You mentioned a timeline in which essentially you established a business. I believe you wrote a beautiful article. Please check out the other ones as well. We have to plug the Medium page. But you talked about some of the proven principles as you built the business. But one of the comments that stuck out to me is that 80% of what you learned was tied to 20% of the things that I believe you either executed or. Can you share that ratio of the 20-80 of what you learned from the business?
It's a Pareto principle that says that 20% of your effort, 80% of your outcomes come from 20% of your efforts effectively. And so we did a lot. There's a lot of scraps on the floor in terms of what we should and shouldn't be doing as business owners. And so I distilled it down into seven lessons learned in business. So Isaac was referencing my blog. It's called Honestly Ed. It's on medium.com, and you can find the article there. But there were 7 lessons learned effectively. There was probably more, but I tried to condense it down to things that would make the most relevant sense to people, particularly those in a professional services space. So I wasn't a product person. My company was a service, like a lawyer or graphic designer or whatnot. It's someone who gets paid hourly or gets paid some sort of retainer to provide a service over a period of time. And so that's what I did for 8 years, managing professional membership-based organizations. So like a Polaris membership-based organization. And then we did a lot of event planning. So our business model was 50% major events, particularly for 501c3 and C6 organizations, professional membership associations and not-for-profits, as well as programs, all manner of programs, marketing, managing the books, doing the website. We literally we were the central nerve center for multiple membership-based organizations. So churches, for instance, typically have their own internal staff, but some small churches just have volunteers where they might hire a firm like ours that services multiple organizations with the same technology, repeatable systems, and continuity so that you don't lose that key volunteer, you don't lose all your data. So it was a learning journey, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it, but it was not without its challenges, for sure. I will say this, just in the spirit of even the purpose piece. Pastor, when I was younger, the thing that used to light me up most often was just anything related to the human will, human potential. I really believe that that's God's greatest gift to us, separate from his son. This ability for us to choose. I just love it. I mean, I just can't get enough of it. And the fact that we can help each other do that. And I've always, for whatever reason, had an effect on people around this idea of making a light bulb come on. Even when I did not intend to, even when I didn't even want to, it just kind of came through. So similar to making it, I don't always make it plain, but it comes through. And so I happen to find myself in relationship to people. And I will say this, I've never had a political aspiration in my life, but I did have a relationship with someone with whom I shared values, whom, for whatever reason, I lit up, and whom trusted me to actually get things done. And that's how I ended up where I am now. This was not on my trajectory, but I'm an effective project manager, and I know how to run an organization. And he knows all about politics. And so it's a really good partnership. We don't get in each other's lanes, and we're eager to grow together. So I'm just saying, in terms of purpose, it's not a straight line. It really is about you going deeper into it and having faith that you're going to be in the right space and keeping your head up enough to be able to be aware when something happens, not digging down deeper, but your head up.
May I say something to that?
Please.
When you talk about purpose, that's critical to know why you're here, what you should be doing. Speaking from my own vantage point, I came to the reality of purpose. Okay, I knew purpose, but if you don't know the natural side of it, you'll hit a wall. For example, the feeding of the 5,000. Okay, the Bible, and this is what I had to learn, that natural side. The Bible doesn't tell us everything that went on in that feeding of that 5,000, but there were at least three things that happened. There was, since we got business people, there was an objective. We got to feed these people, 20,000 people. There was a strategy. We don't get into the details, but it's there. And then there was execution. It was not just prayer. It was not just having a purpose. It was those things, an objective. We got to feed these folk. It was a strategy, and there are components to that. And then there was execution. If you have purpose and discover it, and you ignore these three elements, you're still not going to be successful. You're still going to walk around feeling like, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. Can I walk you through that for a minute? Okay. Objective. Where do we hope to be? Where you want to be? What's your hope for future? Where you going? You got to start there. If you don't know where you're going, you don't know when you're going to get there. Strategy. I divided into two things. Evaluation. Where am I now and how did I get here? In other words, Jesus didn't intend to feed people. That wasn't his purpose. His purpose was to take the disciples on a retreat, to get away from the people because they didn't have any rest. The people outran them, and now they had a crisis, so now we got to come up with a strategy. Okay, so how did they get there? Clarifying your present reality. Our present reality is we got all these people we got to feed, and we don't have enough resources. Then I got a plan. Who gonna feed these folk? What are our resources? How much time we got? We got just enough time before daylight. We got enough daylight. And then how we going to do it? We're gonna have everybody to sit down in 50s and 100s. So you got the strategy, and then you got execution. Execution has components. Can I share it?
Please do.
Okay. Execution deals with the resources, and we talk about budgets. What's available to us? What's available? What income do we have? What expenses do we have? And see, Jesus understood we don't have enough resources, so we got to add prayer to that, and we got to add faith in God. Resources. Alignment. We got to have all these apostles doing something, but it has to be in line with what our vision is. Our vision is to feed these folk. So we got 3 disciples over there feeding the children, 3 disciples feeding the teenagers. We got 3 disciples feeding the seniors, and 3 disciples feeding the rest of the folk. But everybody is feeding somebody, so it's consistent in alignment with the plan. If you have 3 disciples over there holding a Bible study, or 3 disciples, they got this program, they got this counseling program, it doesn't fit. It's not in alignment. After alignment, you have to think of decision-making rights. We got to give these people the right to make decisions without coming back to me. Because they have to come, if the baby's crying, the baby is crying, and they got to go talk to Jesus about the baby crying, that's going to slow us down. So we have to have decision-making rights. Giving these people, these apostles, the right to make independent decisions without coming back. So that's your decision making rights. And then you got to prioritize how we go prioritization. How we gonna feed these folk? We're gonna feed the babies first, the kids first, so they get quiet. Then we're gonna feed. Then we're gonna feed the seniors, so they don't have to stand so long. We're gonna feed the ladies, and then we prioritization, systems, performance management. We got to monitor, we got to measure, and we got to hold accountable. And then we got to have resilience, because no plan will ever work the way you plan it. So you got to be able to bounce back. So when you read the story of the feeding of 5,000, you think Jesus just prayed.
There was objective strategy and execution tied to it. And I want to continue to unpack what you just mentioned in regards of, you may set out on a plan, but it's not necessarily going to go that way. So in the process of you identifying the objective, possibly as you're ideating the strategy, when something happens, some level of disruption, something that was out the blue, how do you address it as a leader? Because you mentioned something earlier when you said there's certain conversations that are, it will be unauthorized if I had it in public, right? There's certain conversations that are private, maybe with your wife, maybe with your spouse, whoever you may be, for our audience listening. When something happens, how do you address it as a leader? Whatever that thing is, I'll let you land the plane, but there is a disruption. You're a little disheveled. How do you level set and say, all right, let me get back in the saddle and keep going?
Well, I guess there's a couple ways to think about that. First of all is to refocus on what it is you set out to do. And that is the easiest thing to lose when something big happens. And if you're talking about something if you're talking about COVID, for instance, something really, really upsetting. Well, I was listening to what Dr. Moore was saying, and you need to assess the situation you're in. And so sometimes that means that your big goals pause because you got to, for all lack of better terms, live to die another day, right? You got to take care of the here and now. You got to be present. And so I would say you got to triage where you are, assess, and there's a possibility you may need to triage. But I will tell you, COVID is actually an apt example, because I'm thinking about some of the things that we set out to do. And I'm using this administration as a good reference point for the strategy conversation, because we have such an ambitious agenda. There is strategy attached to it. We're tracking a lot, but it has zigged and zagged a lot in some instances based on the opportunities or the challenges. COVID is a really good example of that, where we didn't have a part of our strategy was not to do teleworking, for instance. But because we had to adapt, all of a sudden, the city has become a lot more nimble in ways that we hoped it would in terms of being efficient. And while we're not as efficient as we want to be, it has really been a unique opportunity for us to sort of leapfrog our own sense of what's possible. So I would say, to answer your question more directly, when you have something really big that upsets the apple cart, so to speak, get clear about where you are, fix the issue, but get back on track as quickly as possible. I mean, it's just that simple. I don't want to overcomplicate something that's really, really straightforward. Get back on track. And I would say there's two ways you really want to do that. One is to make sure that your team is fortified, because you really are not out there on your own, even for entrepreneurs. So for those of us who have smaller companies, sometimes we think too small about who our team is. When I had my firm, I did have an advisory board, and it included faith leader, included my personal financial advisor. It also included a client or two. We tried to think broadly about the universe of people that were around us. And so I would say make sure that you're fortified and fortifying your teams. And then the second thing is really just here. So I'll let Dr. Moore speak to the spiritual piece, but I would say it's easy to lose yourself. It's easy to lose yourself in an entrepreneurial journey. And I would encourage those of you who are on it, no matter where you are, to just make sure you are taking care of yourself. Because sometimes your vision rises and falls to sometimes our feelings, right? As opposed to the sort of an evergreen spiritual God-given vision. We let our feelings get in the way, it'll shift. And man, you got to be stayed. And I think that having a good advisor along the way, but also just having everything written down that you come back to, it's about getting back on course.
Well, from a planning standpoint, you're gonna build in contingencies. I mean, you got to build in contingencies because things happen. For example, when we were building the dome, we built a 3,000 seat dome, and there were things that happened. One time there was a delay in the steel. That's out of our control, okay? But if you plan right up front, you got contingencies if there's some delays or something like that. From a leadership standpoint, from a planning standpoint, you build in contingencies. From a leadership standpoint, you have to create a philosophy of resilience. I mean, we gonna bounce back. We gonna get up. We in good shape. Everything is all right. So resilience has to be a part of the execution. If you think you're gonna go from A to Z and nothing happens, I mean, nothing gonna happen. The way we plan it, it's just gonna happen. You're gonna struggle. So you build up your team as a part of the execution, resilience. We're gonna bounce back. We may have some setbacks, may have some disappointment, but we got the objective. We know where we're going, and we're gonna deal with it. So from a planning, contingencies, from a leadership, building in resilience, and really that's you. See, to me, that's you. If you fall apart because there are delays, then your team is gonna feel like that. But if you all right, you together, then it's contagious. It spreads to your team. Now you may go home and cry. You may go home and cry. You know, you may go home and cry. That's where your companion advisor come in. But in front of your team, no, your team. The team see confidence. We got this. We got this.
That's good. And Dr. Moore, Pastor Mike, I know you have so many titles, so many roles that you play, not only being a role model, but modeling the role. One of the things that I would love for you to speak on is just the vision that triggered Faith Chapel being out in Wylam. So I'm originally from Florida. Folks know I'm Jamaican by blood, so 95% of my family is overseas. And so whenever we moved to Birmingham, shout out Sanford University, had a football scholarship, met my wife in Birmingham, and a couple of days before we got married, we moved out to Wylam. This is back in 2015. So we would tell folks, like, yeah, we got a house in Wylam. They was like, you sure? you all right? You know, hey, did you think about this? You know, there's Hoover. They would give me alternatives. I'm like, nah, I love the area. And of course, one of the key cornerstones of Wylam is Faith Chapel and the community that's been built. But I would love for you to speak to this element of leadership that sometimes is spoken amongst other leaders to where you feel like it's lonely. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to the journey of building Faith Chapel, of so many people not really understanding, possibly not even needing to understand the vision that's been downloaded into you, but also how you were able to still continue the work, even though that you were the only one that held the visual as you were building out the team to put it actually in place?
Boy, that's a great question. That one could cause me to cry. It's a lonely place. Oh, it's a lonely place. If you have something on the inside of you, and I'm not talking about family now because your family going to be with you, but I'm talking about if you got something inside of you, but nobody sees it but you. Nobody see that thing but you. For me, the key was I didn't ask for it. Okay, I was in law school, minding my own business, trying to be a black paramason. And he called me. He called me. That's the thing that killed me, is I knew it wasn't my idea. I wasn't ego tripping. I wasn't trying to build me a kingdom. I didn't want none of it. I knew he gave it to me. and I keep a journal. I write down things that go all the way back to the 80s. And I learned principles walking. It's something I learned, Isaac. Once I got called, I thought I needed to go to seminary, but God didn't want me to go to seminary because I was going to go to the wrong one. And they would have talked me out of everything. Okay. So when you don't know anything, when you don't know what you're doing, you'll pray. And so the good thing that happened for me is I had a call and I learned to pray. Because I didn't know nothing. See, I don't know this. I don't know how to preach. I don't know how to counsel. I don't know how to teach. I don't know this stuff. I've been to seminary, I've been to Bible school, so I don't know. So I prayed. And I talked to God about it. And you cry and you try this, and sometimes that's why if you don't have a mentor, proximity, you make a lot of mistakes. But the thing that keeps you, and I tell people this all the time, you gotta know it. You gotta know you're supposed to be doing it. Because if you don't know, you'll quit. I tried to quit hundreds of times, and I went to bed crying, said, I'm through with this, but it was there. And it's not just preaching. I'm not just talking about preaching. What's in you? And God put that in you. And what I learned that if you are willing to walk by yourself, then God will give you somebody to walk it out. Most people want to have all these folk walking with them first.
That's right.
No, it's got to be tested in the crucible of a lack of anybody knowing you. They don't care whether you live or die. You're nobody in the eyes of the people, but you got it. And see, I was raised in Wylam. That's where I was raised up, and that's where he wanted me to do something, and I got it. So it wasn't so much me. You know what I mean? It wasn't intelligence. It wasn't strength. It was none of that. It was he gave it to me, and I know it. And so my philosophy, just preach another sermon. Nobody's coming, preach another sermon.
That's right.
Nobody want to hear you, preach another sermon. And I would leave church crying like a baby, because nobody was coming. You could take a bowling ball, throw it in any direction, I hit a soul. You could park anywhere in our parking lot. You could you can park any kind of way. Folk were staying away by the thousands, man. And a lot of people look at our church, man. It was 14 to 16 years before we started growing. But you gotta have it. You gotta have that. And it could be education. It could be a teacher. It could be a business. It's not just preaching, but you gotta know you're supposed to be doing it. And if you got that, you can stay.
Ed, I think you are on cue.
Oh, I was just going to say the church says. That's it.
I believe that there's been this theme also that I've captured as we've been having this conversation. I would say the power of documenting your story. You mentioned that you can go all the way back into 1980 to be able to reflect and also speak to what you were thinking in those times. And Ed, you've inspired me to document more, and I would love for the both of you to speak to how and again, the theme is leadership. Yes, we're talking about business, but these are all transferable skills that we can apply towards our families, but we can apply towards ourselves. But just the power of the pen, how important has it been for you to not only document this journey, but does it also play a role in releasing that experience?
Well, how many books you have? He got a couple books, so I'll let him talk to it. He's actually really codified it, but I will share just a couple of thoughts. For many years, first of all, one of my first loves is writing. It's the word in general. I was a calligrapher, still a poet, but just the word, reading it, writing it, it doesn't matter. I just love it. It's special to me. So I've always had a love for it. I've always considered it mine. so to speak, and in my own gift, in my own way. If nobody else ever read a thing I wrote, it's okay. I like it. And so that's been my attitude. I will simply say this, though. In 2003, 2004, we started getting involved with community philanthropy. That's the notion that all of us in this room could put our resources together and go and change something significant in this community. We don't have to wait for permission. We don't need a mayor. We don't need a bank. We don't need a lot. We are enough. And that's been the African tradition of giving, collective giving in this country, and particularly in this city in the year of the 60th. So I will simply say that when we were working on the community philanthropy, there was an elder, a community elder, Lynetta Gilbert, who was worked at the Ford Foundation. She had the South. That was her portfolio back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And she said, this work that y'all are doing with Giving Circle, she said, baby, you got to tell your own story. Y'all have got to start taking notes on what's happening right now. It's significant. And I thought, it's cool, but I've been a part of a lot of cool things with many different organizations. What makes this one so uniquely special? And to this point, I don't know what she saw as a community elder, but I believed her because of their relationship. She's truly somebody I greatly admired. And I said, well, Lynetta's saying it, so maybe there's something to it. And so I've managed to keep notes and keep track and keep some relationships. And lo and behold, 20 years later to this year, there have been people like the mayor who have come out of this movement, and dozens of people throughout the country. And understanding the arc of transformation within ourselves and our communities, and therefore the nation, is not a nicety. Writing, codifying, telling your story is not a nicety. I will simply say this. We think about 4 T's in philanthropy: time, talent, treasure. But we forget about that 4th one, which is testimony. And if I were to sit down with each and every single one of you and ask you, how did you really do that? Mm-hmm. How did you really do that? You're going to eventually land on somebody. So while Bishop Dr. Pastor Mike, esteemed elder, while you may have learned a lot, I Googled you and all these things came up, So, you may have learned a lot in this, but if we were to peel back the layers, there's going to be somebody that sparked that. And I would argue that that's the case. Your favorite teacher, there's a singular personality or two. You go back and tell that story. Well, guess what, y'all? You were that person for someone, multiple someones right now. Your testimony actually has convertible value. I don't know how to put that in monetary terms, but people have literally turned their story into money. Whether you're on social media, TikTok, or just in living person. And it is one of the most enduring assets that has existed within this. But it's about the intent. Strategy is about intent. It's about a commitment to an idea, a vision, and then execution on that vision. So I would say that my little writings that I do in my corner of the world were for me. Because of the seat that I occupy in the minds of people in this city and other spaces, earned or unearned in my mind, God has got me here. And I have a responsibility to at least share, reveal, amplify what has been placed in me. Because while it may not resonate with everyone, it'll resonate with enough. And little old me from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, blue collar brother who didn't grow up with any of this fancy stuff we're talking about today, was inspired by a couple of folks who have done far less. Certainly, I can do more in sharing the story. So that's my testimony as it relates to testimony.
I was listening to Ed, and it jogged my memory about, he spoke to you about you're somebody to somebody. And that really blessed me, because I had a Sunday school teacher that saw this little boy playing out in the yard on Sunday and said that little boy need to be in church. And that lady came across there, asked for permission to bring me to church. She became my first mentor, if you want to call it that. And then I had a god aunt Jane. She would teach my god brother us Bible stories, and we had to memorize the books of the Bible. So I think that's beautiful, what you said, and I hope y'all heard that you're that person to somebody. journaling for me was evolutionary. What I mean by that, I came out of a preaching culture, but couldn't preach. I couldn't preach. I mean, I didn't have no hoop. You know, I tried it. Yeah. Hey, I looked in the mirror. Yeah. I said, I'm gonna try this. I'm not getting that pulpit. I try this. That's right. And I went, yeah. And then I said, man, I can't go out here and do this.
No hoop or holler. No hoop or holler.
Listen, I'm gonna look stupid if I do this. So what I did, to your question, I started writing out my sermons, and then I memorized my sermons. That way I could speed up my teaching. And I speeded up so I kind of fit it in a little bit. So just writing out my sermons, then I started journaling my day. Like I would write down May the 3rd, 4th, what the day, 4th?
May the
I would
4th
write
be
it
with you.
down, and I was at Polaris. And I would write this. And so then that became a little demanding. So I evolved to just writing down things that God said to me. And it was very helpful to me. I write down what he said, put the date, the time. It was very helpful to me because inspiration and revelation from God doesn't last. It can be powerful when you receive it, but if you don't write it down, weeks from now, months from now, you lose the clarity on it. It doesn't have the impact. But since I'll write it down, and it's all the way back to the 80s, and I'll sometimes put the scripture stuff on it, then when I'm in a situation, I can go back and see what God said to me. That's good. That's good. And I keep reminding it. And I got that journal right by my bed. I got a Bible, and I got my journal. And so I read it, and I've been reading it for 40 years. I read that journal and look back at what God said. And so I can see things that came to pass. I see other things hadn't come to pass, but I still got it.
This is good. We are going to transition to a Q&A. I have one more question. I know, I'm sorry. I have one more question, and then we're going to transition to our Q&A, and it's on the heels of your comment, Dr. Moore, and I want to, just a personal story. So one of the reasons why I started documenting, again, 95% of my family is overseas. We're the first generation here in the U.S., and so when my kids, great-grandkid, they're going to say Isaac Cooper, right? Like we were the first, and so what can I leave behind that represents my thinking? And that was the inspiration. The transition that you've experienced and also executed was essentially a succession plan. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to your thinking in regards of what type of leadership characteristics you saw in regards of your succession plan? I believe he is here with us today. Yeah. But also how documentation helped fill that need on some of the things that you may no longer need to say audio wise or from a verbal standpoint, but now it's just written on paper.
You know, I didn't initially think succession, and I'm not sure that most leaders think it. And I don't think, not a negative, but I don't think most pastors think succession. I knew that my son was called. I knew that. I didn't know all the stuff, but I knew, because I keep a journal, see. And I knew that he was called early. So but I didn't put that in him like you called, because I understood that you don't want to play with this. You don't want to get out in front of folk and start, I'm called, and God didn't call you. So I didn't want to put it in him, but I knew that he was called. Early in your leadership, you ego tripping, and I don't mean that in a negative way, okay? But the vision is about you. You know, you're going to do this, and you're going to fulfill this, and you're going to walk this out, and you're going to see all this stuff happen. And that was my mindset. As you grow and learn and mature, you understand that you and the vision is not the same.
That's right.
And that the vision is God. It ain't yours. It ain't yours, it's God. So that vision is, I learned that it's evolutionary, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So when God was speaking to Abraham, he was actually speaking to Jacob. He had Jacob in mind when he was talking to Abraham. So when God was talking to me, he actually had Mike in mind.
Don't miss it. Don't miss what he said, y'all.
He had him in mind because the vision is evolutionary. It's not just for one generation. And so and now I got a journal. See, God called his name out to me. I got it written down. Where he called his name out. He told me I was passing the torch. So it helps you in your transition to know that it's the right thing to do. He said, I'm gonna take care of you. You did what I told you to do, and you did well. So that's helping me. I got that in my journal. Got it? I know I'm passing the church, so I got that in my journal. So now we can plan for it. Now, I tried to give it to him earlier, but he said, I was at a cafeteria one time. I think I was a little frustrated. I was a little frustrated. Like, I'm trying to get rid of this thing right here. Hey, I don't know if y'all remember, we was on 280. We was at this restaurant, but Mike didn't even buy into that thing. he didn't buy into that. But then I began to realize, see, and this is the truth. Relevance is generational too.
That's right. That's good.
You understand that? It's not that you move out of the way, but there's you're not supposed to be there forever. God never intended for it. You know what I mean? And so as you mature, plus it's a stewardship. It ain't mine anyway. Building ain't mine, people ain't mine, none of it's mine. So you ain't struggling with leaving it because it's not yours.
That's good.
I mean, you struggle with leaving something that's yours, but it was never mine. So now all I wanted was him to be ready. And we spent quite a bit of time before. He was working on the natural side, but I was working on him. See, I'm spending time with him. We talking about this pastor thing. I'm sharing out of my heart with him because he's going to do more than I did. Because it's a whole different generation. Got it? So my job now is to help young brothers like you. Smart, intelligent, got your thing together. Brothers like that, and encourage you to do your thing, man. Go ahead and do your thing. So it's not getting out of the way and become, like people say, I congratulations on your retirement. I'm not retired. I just transitioned. That's right. That's right. I'm doing this probably more than I did when I was doing that. So that's the journey. And as you mature, you want other people to do it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like when you're younger, and I bet you if you interview all the pastors that around my age started out there, we were all ego tripping. We thought we were going to win the world. But as we matured, we realized we were going to win part of it. Our part. So now all these pastors, we see each other, we love each other. Because we've matured. And as you mature, you want your successor to succeed because you love that vision. You love God and you love those people. And it was never about you.
That's good. All right. I know it's been stirred up. May have some questions from the audience. Okay, I think we got the mic passed around. There we go.
Hello. So I wrote it down so I won't be long. So the two parts of leadership, the people part and then the plan part, and I feel like we talked a whole lot about the plan, but I was curious if either of you have either explicit or maybe it's just instinctual, like a checklist of things that you make sure to do or identify in the people you're leading so that you can do the inspiring and the motivating part, because the plan and the people. And I've been under leaders who, we've seen them have strengths in one side or the other. So I was curious about how do you approach the people part?
It's a big part of it is mind renewal. The average person, average leader is more project focused than people focused. That's kind of like putting the cart up front and the horse behind the cart. It's really the people that's your greatest asset. I mean, it's the people. It's not the project. It's not the task. It's the people. And so it begins with mind renewal, understanding that as a leader, you're getting something done through people. But it's not just about the end, okay? It's not just about what you get done. It's about developing those people while you're getting this done. And so you can get this done, accomplished, and not be successful.
That's right.
Because if you got a trail of bodies, but you accomplish this, God doesn't see that as success because God loves people. So the leader has to think, I got to do something positive for these people. I got to add value to these people. I got to grow these people. I got to give these people opportunities to learn, to grow, give these people what they need. I got to love on these people. I got to care about these people because God is into this more than he is into that. Does that make sense? So if I'm focusing on these people, trying to give them the tools that they need, trying to encourage them, build them up, give them opportunities to do things and let them grow and make decisions. So I've got to concentrate on developing them to help them become leaders. And that's why people sometimes feel like you use me. Sometimes leaders, they say, you use me. Well, some of that is legitimate. It is. Because we were so focused on getting something done that we wasn't growing them. We wasn't developing them. They weren't even on our radar. So it's mind renewal, it's understanding. It's with God, it's really about this. And if you do this right, develop the people, support the people, love the people, care for the people, you'll get this done. And the difference between this, and I heard John Maxwell say the difference between a boss and a leader. A boss, people do things for a boss because they have to. But they do things for a leader because they want to. They want to serve you. They want to support you. They want to help you get this thing done because they know you care about them and not just this project.
Yes.
So it's mind renewal.
I like the mind renewal. That's great. I would also say, so in terms of building a team, two things, trust and talent, broadly speaking. Trust meaning, I don't even know if we're not supposed to, if it's taboo, but loyalty does matter. Fidelity to the vision and fidelity to the person called to help drive that vision. And so I would say, as you're thinking about building your team, make sure you have value alignment. That's whether you're going to work with someone or someone's coming to work with you, value alignment almost above all. And then constantly nurturing that trust. The other part of that is they shouldn't even be in the conversation with you if they don't have evidence that they can actually get some things done. Yeah. And I say get things done, that doesn't mean that they've done exactly what it is you need them to do, because sometimes they have skills that are adjacent to the job description. But if they have enough, and you can see that, and that's why I like the mind renewal, because it is about also having clarity. When you actually see someone, do you see them as a full person? And all of us have been surprised by the people we've engaged, people that we thought would perform very well because they had the credentials, but the other parts just weren't there. Yeah. And then there are other people where it's like, oh my God, they had that one little bit of thing that I hoped that they had, and they had way more. And that comes with time and experience. The other thing I would say is just in terms of the renewal piece, but on the people development side, sometimes we miss this. There's Aesop's fable about the goose with the golden egg. And I won't take you all the way through it, but at the end of the story, there's a goose that gets cut open because somebody's trying to get all the golden eggs out of it. Not knowing that keeping the goose alive, feeding the goose, nurturing the goose so that every day you get a golden egg, you continue to get that. And sometimes we're so quick to get to where we got to go, to your point, that we just go and try to go for the gusto. And it's a long game. So It's a long game, and you know, on the blog piece that Isaac was referring, I talk about us rebranding. Our company was Projects Unlimited, and based on interacting with people, you know, 5 years in, we decided to rebrand, and it wasn't just a name change. It was like the whole spirit of the company, how people interacted with us, how enthusiastic people were. It was different, and that came by way of the team. So having a team that's aligned and bought in is just incredibly important. Trust and talent, but also constantly supporting them along the way.
Thank you both for sharing today. I had a colleague of mine share. He said, "Know when to sow and know when to sell." And he said some of the best companies know how to do both. And I wanted to get your perspective on that from a standpoint of know when you could make a buck, but it really needs to be more about intent and the overall brand. Like, how do you want to be perceived? Give me your thoughts on that.
Are you saying whether to take on a client or not?
No, as an example, if I get paid to put on a project and the person doesn't have the funds to pay me, and they kind of put that up front, I can turn and drop the idea during the discussion period. Or I can say, you know, this person has a great cause, doing a great thing for a lot of people. I want to sow into that.
Let me just share this. Dr. Moore said something about planning as it relates to being able to execute. You have to have contingencies, right? I would say that works on the proactive side too. It's not just risk mitigation. It's just not planning for downside. You got to plan for the upside too. What if you get an opportunity to bless somebody? That shouldn't be a surprise to you if you're actually walking in purpose, if you got a clear mission. You should know that that's a likely possibility if you keep doing what you're doing, if you believe in what you're doing. So having systems and platforms in place. So I would say for every entrepreneur in here, yes, you've got your for-profit, LLC, S Corp, B Corp, whatever it is. That's great. But you should have a strategy for being able to give back, to support, to leverage things. And that should come in two forms. One is a bona fide not-for-profit. I'm not saying that you got to control it, because I have strong feelings that everybody don't need to go out here and create their own institution. You got flexible institutions like the Penny Foundation and Community Foundation, where you can create a fund, let them handle the administration, you get the tax benefit, and you get access to a platform. But there are other networks. So the other part of this is, man, being in relationship to people that can help you figure that out on the fly is important. So Isaac and I believe several of you all are connected with groups. I call them collectives, just little networks of nodes of people, peer groups, right? While you may be mentoring your son got his own peer group, right, that he's nurtured. And hopefully it's cross-sectorial, meaning that he's got some for-profit folks, he's got people doing all kinds of stuff, so that when an opportunity comes up, you can put something together that makes sense. So I would just say, in terms of strategy, be proactive about building platforms and systems that can withstand the weight of opportunities that will come. And have a proactive sense of what you're willing to give away and not. That shouldn't be if you've qualified the prospect, you will know already what's possible. If they're going to come back and say, I don't have the money, well, then you should already know what you're going to do with that, because that's absolutely going to happen with the number of people you'll be engaging. So having systems in place and having people in place that can help you solve for that, but it really goes back to that vision part. You know?
And if I'm hearing you accurately, it goes to values, you know, establishing values, core values for your business, your company, whatever you're doing. What are your values? Is profit motive? How high, you got to have profit to exist. How high is profit? You know what I mean? Because it may be an investment. They may not be able to pay you, but it may be an investment on something future, and it depends on what your values are in your organization. What are you value? If it's all about profit, then I'm through. That's right. I'm out of here. I can't do anything with you. You know, you don't have the money. But it depends. You got to have other values too, other than the profit, in order to really. And so this may sound maybe totally different. One of our values was giving. See, one of our values as a church was giving. It was high on our list. We didn't do a lot of talking about it, but it was high on our list. So sometimes when you're giving, you don't always see an upfront thing. You know what I mean? But if it's a value, then you may say yes to a client even though they can't give you a penny.
But even if it is a value, you can still, there's just a way to do it. So just, that's why I put in systems in place to support that value is important.
Right.
Any more questions? All right, well, let's give our panelists a round of applause. And would love to bring up the founder of Polaris, Alicia Moore.
I don't know, but I don't know. I got chills. Like, this was an amazing conversation. And so could we just give Isaac a round of applause for the level of questions? Dr. Moore and Mr. Ed Fields, thank you guys so much for pouring out the way that you did in such an authentic way. And so this has been a long week of events for National Small Business Week. But as an organization, we wanted to ensure that we were able to do something as well to amplify and support small business owners and entrepreneurs. And this was an amazing end to the week. And most of the time it's for other people, but I appreciate it because it also poured into me. So thank you guys so much. I got some other ideas. I think this is a dynamic trio. So I'm gonna put something together. Just
Entrepreneurs.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? When I text you, just respond. But thank you guys so much. Thank you everyone who came out. I hope that it was beneficial for you. One thing that was really important for me this week is to have conversations and collisions that were tangible. If you've been here throughout the week, you've heard me say this. I think a lot, we all have stuff to do. We all have a lot on our plates. And when you go somewhere, you give an hour or an hour and a half of your time, you want to walk away with something. And so I wanted to ensure that these conversations were tangible. So I hope that you were able to take something and apply it today. But the other important piece of this for me was not to just have good information and to feel good, is to do something with it, but then also have a place to connect to community and have people to hold you accountable. So even in this space, I was almost brought to tears, but no, I'm a gangster. So it was like, because I think about the vision of Polaris and having a picture, a 3D rendering on my wall, and not knowing how and if it was ever gonna happen. And then we get moments like this, where Isaac, who I consider a brother, who is bright, intelligent, and doing so many amazing things, it's just phenomenal. Pastor Mike, who has been a voice since I came to Birmingham, who has inspired me, changed the way I think about things, and your leadership and what you have imparted has changed my life and my family's life. And then Ed, who's just a beast, humbly, because you know, brother Ed, but really you're a humble beast, you know what I'm saying? And to have you three phenomenal people right here in this space that was just an idea, for me, it's affirming. And so, again, it translates back to after this week of going to sessions and seminars and panels, and there's so many things happening around the city, I want you to know that this is a space for you to connect, to find community, to find resources. So we have an app. You can download it on your Droid or your iPhone, whichever you prefer. And you can get push notifications about different events, because we're going to do this again. Different events going on, people who are already in the community, so that not only do you have information, but you can hold yourself accountable, and you have people to hold you accountable to the vision, to the execution, and the strategy piece. So I just wanted to say thank you all for coming. Thank you all so much for pouring out. And I thank y'all for giving us a little extra piece of your time. I see Isaac staring at it. Okay. But thank you guys for giving us a little extra bit of your afternoon. And I hope that this was beneficial for you, and have an amazing rest of the day.